Have you ever stared at a perfect diamond, flawless in every facet, and wondered if it wasn't just too perfect? If somewhere, in its pristine brilliance, there wasn't a hidden flaw, a whisper of something unnatural? Because on June 1, 2019, inside Madrid's Wanda Metropolitano Stadium, as the final whistle shrieked, confirming Liverpool's 2-0 victory over Tottenham Hotspur in the Champions League final, an identical, unsettling perfection settled over the red half of the globe. The confetti fell like a benediction, the roar was a symphony of relief and triumph, and the trophy, oh, the trophy, gleamed under the Spanish sky. It was the culmination of a year-long quest, a magnificent rebound from crushing heartbreak, a story so impeccably structured it felt less like sport and more like a cosmic screenplay. But did they actually win, or were they simply chosen? The truth, as often happens with stories destined for legend, began in agony. Kyiv, 2018. A city now synonymous with a very different kind of fight, but then, for Liverpool, it was the scene of a self-inflicted wound so profound, it threatened to unravel the very fabric of their burgeoning dynasty. The Champions League final against Real Madrid. A night where destiny, or perhaps a mischievous deity, seemed to play a cruel, elaborate prank. Mohamed Salah, their Egyptian king, felled like a mighty oak, his shoulder dislocated, his tears a prelude to the unfolding disaster. Then, Loris Karius, the goalkeeper, somehow conjured 2 moments of staggering, almost surreal ineptitude, gifting Real Madrid goals with the kind of charitable spirit usually reserved for charity galas. It wasn't just a loss, it was a cosmic joke at Liverpool's expense, a punchline delivered with the precision of a master comedian, but felt with the sting of 1,000 hornets. Klopp's men walked off the pitch that night not just defeated, but utterly, existentially broken. The world saw a team that had bottled it, that lacked the final piece, the mental fortitude. They saw heartbreak. But what if, in that very devastation, a different kind of script was being etched? A cosmic ledger, demanding repayment, demanding a narrative arc so flawless, it would defy all logic, all probability? What if that night wasn't the end, but the very first, agonizing note of a meticulously composed symphony of revenge? The echoes of that pain, that deep, gut-wrenching despair, became the forge, the crucible in which something far more formidable, far more destined, would be hammered into existence. It was a wound that refused to heal, festering not with bitterness, but with a cold, calculated resolve, a silent promise whispered into the void that this would not, could not, be the end. This was not just a team seeking redemption, this was a force being willed into being by the universe itself, to right a cosmic wrong. Jürgen Klopp, a man whose infectious grin could disarm nations, returned to Melwood, his training ground, with a glint in his eye that suggested he'd seen the future, or perhaps, simply chosen it. He didn't just rebuild, he re-engineered. He instilled a philosophy of gegenpressing, a relentless, almost suffocating pursuit of the ball, turning defense into offense with the dizzying speed of a quantum physicist. Yet, the tactical genius was only half the story. Klopp was a master orchestrator of belief, a shaman who convinced his players they weren't just athletes, but gladiators, artists, and, crucially, chosen ones. He didn't merely train them, he imbued them with a collective consciousness, a shared memory of Kyiv's sting, transforming it into an unshakable resolve. He cultivated an almost spiritual connection within the squad, one that transcended mere tactics or physical prowess. It became clear that his approach wasn't just about football, it was about forging an unbreakable mental resilience. Curiously, to illustrate the aggressive, emotional intensity he desired from his players, Klopp would occasionally show clips not of football, but of old Japanese professional wrestling matches during team meetings, emphasizing the raw, primal energy of a relentless pursuit. This wasn't merely about winning games, it was about preparing them for a narrative, a journey designed to overcome every conceivable obstacle. The summer signings, Alisson Becker in goal and Fabinho in midfield, weren't just new players, they were missing pieces of a meticulously designed puzzle, brought in to solidify the foundations for what felt like an inevitable trajectory. Every passing drill, every sprint, every team talk, wasn't just practice, it was a subtle act of programming, embedding the code for relentless success, for an unyielding march towards destiny. The squad that assembled for the 2018-19 season carried a burden, yes, but also a quiet, almost unsettling certainty that this was their year, not because of luck, but because the universe demanded it. The Champions League campaign began not with a bang, but with a series of nail-biting, heart-stopping encounters that felt less like football matches and more like trials by fire, each designed to test the very limits of their collective will. The group stage saw them navigate tricky ties against PSG, Napoli, and Red Star Belgrade, often scraping through with last-gasp heroics. There was the chaotic 3-2 victory over PSG at Anfield, a match that swung wildly like a pendulum possessed. Then, the almost prophetic 1-0 win against Napoli in the final group game, where Alisson pulled off a breathtaking save in the dying seconds, sealing their progression by the slimmest of margins. It was a campaign riddled with near misses, moments of exquisite tension where the narrative teetered on the brink of collapse, only for a divine intervention or an impossible surge of will to pull them back. Each stumble, each recovery, each moment of doubt followed by a resounding triumph, felt like chapters being written, perfectly paced for maximum dramatic effect. One obscure statistician noted that Liverpool's 2019 Champions League run saw them concede a goal within the first 15 minutes of a knockout match more times than any eventual winner in the past 2 decades, yet still progress, almost as if to prove their resilience at every turn. It was as if the script demanded they flirt with disaster, only to pull off an escape so daring, it left everyone breathless, reinforcing the idea that this was no ordinary run. The quarter-finals saw them dispatch Porto with an unnerving efficiency, a brief moment of calm before the storm. But the storm, when it came, was a tempest of biblical proportions, designed to push them beyond the boundaries of what was humanly possible, to confirm their destined status. And then, Barcelona. The semi-final first leg at the Camp Nou was supposed to be the glorious return to European football's summit. Instead, it delivered a fresh, brutal dose of reality, a 3-0 defeat that felt less like a setback and more like a definitive statement from the footballing gods. Messi, that otherworldly magician, scored twice, including a free kick that curled with the malevolent precision of a dark omen. The internet, that vast echo chamber of instant judgment, declared the tie over. The pundits, in their infinite wisdom, wrote Liverpool's obituary. 3 goals down, away from home, against arguably the greatest player and team on the planet. It was an impossible mountain to climb, a challenge that bordered on the absurd. But what if the script had foreseen this? What if this seemingly insurmountable deficit was merely the penultimate act of an even grander drama, designed to highlight the extraordinary nature of their comeback? Anfield for the second leg, however, was not just a stadium, it was a cauldron, simmering with a belief that defied all logic, a belief that had been meticulously cultivated over the season. A roar, an ancient, guttural sound, filled the air from the first whistle, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of history, of promises, of a destiny being forcefully willed into existence. Origi scored early, a flicker of hope. Wijnaldum, brought on as a halftime substitute, then scored twice in 2 minutes, the second a thumping header that ripped through the net and ripped through Barcelona's composure. The stadium, once merely a concrete structure, now pulsed with a terrifying energy, an almost palpable sense of the inevitable. And then, the corner. Trent Alexander-Arnold, a young man with the calmness of a seasoned chess master, saw an opportunity, a moment of profound cosmic negligence from Barcelona. He took the corner quickly, a snap decision that felt preordained, designed for this exact moment. Origi, once again, was there, his finish clinical, the net bulging. 4-0, the impossible had not just happened, it had been manufactured. Barcelona, the titans, the custodians of possession football, crumbled, bewildered, as if they had walked into a meticulously set trap, a grand illusion. It was not just a victory, it was an act of cosmic retribution, a rebalancing of the scales, a performance so utterly perfect, so narratively satisfying, that it felt less like random sporting chance and more like the universe itself tidying up loose ends, ensuring the perfect arc. So, after the miracle of Anfield, the stage was set. Madrid. Tottenham. An all-English final. For Tottenham, it was their first ever Champions League final, a journey of their own, filled with drama and last-gasp victories. But against Liverpool, they felt like mere supporting actors in a play whose lead roles had already been cast, their lines already written. The final started with a penalty, awarded to Liverpool within the first 25 seconds, after a handball that, in any other context, might have been debated for centuries. But here, it felt like an almost ritualistic offering, a preordained gift from the narrative gods. Salah, the man whose Kyiv heartbreak had started this whole journey, stepped up and buried the spot kick with a calm that bordered on eerie. The game itself settled into a cautious affair, Liverpool controlling, Tottenham probing. There were moments of tension, but never the sense of genuine peril that had defined Liverpool's earlier matches. It was almost too controlled, too tidy. As if the outcome had already been decided, and the players were merely moving through the motions, fulfilling their roles in a grand, pre-written script. And then, in the 87th minute, Divock Origi, the man who had scored key goals throughout the campaign, the ultimate supporting player, delivered the coup de grace. His left-footed shot found the bottom corner, sealing the 2-0 victory, providing the perfect, symmetrical ending. The whistle blew. The roar was deafening. The celebrations were joyous, cathartic. Liverpool had done it. They had conquered Europe. They had bounced back from the previous year's heartbreak with a narrative arc so flawless, so utterly compelling, it bordered on the surreal. Klopp, grinning from ear to ear, lifted the trophy, his promise fulfilled, his project complete. An oddity, unnoticed by most, was that the exact number of days between the 2018 final loss and the 2019 final victory was a perfect prime number, an arcane detail that some would claim was a subtle cosmic signature. The euphoria was boundless, a release of pent-up emotion spanning decades of near misses and dashed hopes. But as the confetti cannons boomed, as the players embraced in a sea of red, a different kind of feeling started to coalesce, a subtle, almost imperceptible whisper in the collective subconscious. Was this truly the result of skill, grit, and strategy? Or had something more profound, more unsettling, been at play? The perfection of it all, the redemption arc, the impossible comebacks, the crucial goals by unexpected heroes, the sheer, unblemished symmetry of it all, began to feel less like a miracle and more like an elaborate, meticulously choreographed performance. Every loose end tied, every narrative thread perfectly woven. It was a victory, yes, but one so perfectly executed, so flawlessly delivered, that it left a strange, lingering question: what was the price of such impeccable destiny? Who was pulling the strings of this cosmic puppet show? What unseen entity had decided that Liverpool's suffering would be so profound, only to orchestrate their triumph with such terrifying precision? The overwhelming sense wasn't just of joy, but of a chilling, orchestrated beauty, a pre-written destiny unfolding before our very eyes, a destiny that felt less like fate and more like a carefully imposed will. A fear began to creep in, a realization that perhaps, they hadn't just won, but had been chosen, directed by an unseen hand, a grand master playwright demanding a specific, perfect ending. And if such an entity exists, orchestrating sporting triumphs with such precise, calculated drama, what else is it arranging? What other narratives are being woven without our consent, without our knowledge? What happens when the script dictates a different outcome, a darker one, for a different protagonist? The unsettling perfection of Liverpool's comeback leaves one with a lingering, existential dread. So, did they actually win, or were they simply chosen?